Hello. In this exercise, we're going to be looking at Photoshop selection tools. We're going to see a wide range of tools that allow you to select parts or important parts of an image so that you can isolate that area and either copy it, replace it, change the color, basically make alterations without altering other parts of the image. Let's start by opening an image up. Go to File, Open, and look for selection tools.jpg in the selection tools basics folder from your previously downloaded files. We're going to open up this one here, selection tools.jpg. Open that up. And there it is. Now, one thing we want to make sure is we're working in a consistent workspace. If your panels are all messed up in a way that isn't helpful for you, don't forget, you can always go to Window, Workspace, and reset the workspace here by Reset Essentials or by loading your previously saved workspace. In this particular exercise, we're going to be working a lot with the Layers panel and the Properties panel, which will switch occasionally once we make some selections. Feel free to move the panels outside of the area to bring them closer to your workspace. You want to have an ergonomic flow where things are close by. You can always put them back by just dragging and dropping them in and changing the order. There you go. So our selection tools are primarily here on the left-hand side in the tool area. So if you hover over some of these tools, you'll get previews, for example, like this, and you'll get a little quick demo as to what that particular tool does. So this lasso tool is a pretty basic selection tool. The one above it is the rectangular marquee tool, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It creates a rectangle, and when you release that rectangle, it has that area selected. Now, if you click and hold these buttons, don't forget that there are sub-items hidden away under there. So if you're not in the need of a rectangular marquee tool, you can crack open the elliptical marquee tool depending on what you're doing. Or if you need to select a single row of pixels for whatever reason, those tools are available here. Same thing with the lasso tool. By default, it's the one that's selected and showing. However, there are subcategories of lassos that you can also use depending on the type of work you need to get done. So all of these complement each other. This is the magic wand tool over here. Usually when you hover over a tool, you get a little tooltip. So here you have the magic wand tool, quick selection tool, and the object selection tool. These are a bit different than the manual selection tools in that they are somewhat automated and there's somewhat artificial intelligence involved here that Photoshop, based on the image that it processes, and then basically creates a selection based on certain criteria. So these are the three primary tools and the variations of them that we're going to be focusing on. And with these tools, we can make all sorts of selections. Sometimes you have to mix and match different tools depending on the situation. Other times, one tool will get the job done. But what's important is to look at the image, understand what the difficulty is in making the selection, and then knowing which tool will get the job done quickly and efficiently without too many headaches. There are other ways of making selections in Photoshop as well, which we'll explore. Some are a bit more advanced, some are pretty straightforward. So for example, if you click the select menu item up here, you have different options. So select all is basically select the entire image. If you have an existing selection, you can deselect it here, you can reselect, and you can also invert the selection that you've made. Sometimes you want to exclude an object, but it's easier to select that specific object, so you could select it and then invert the selection so that you select everything but that. Anyway, you'll see that in action shortly. Besides that, we have the color range, which will find a specific color in the image and make a selection based on that. The focus area, depending on the type of image that you're using, will have Photoshop automatically create selection. And of course, subject, which again, the artificial intelligence will analyze the picture and basically make a selection based on what it thinks it qualifies as the subject of the image. It's hit or miss sometimes, but you know what? If it takes 90% of the work off your hands and then you can just go in and touch it up using some tools, that's great also. And then there's the big jumbo select and mask utility, which we're going to be looking in more detail in later on. So let's start with the basics. The rectangular marquee tool over here allows you to create, pretty straightforward, a rectangular selection. I'm going to bring the layers panel in a bit closer so you can see what's happening as we make changes to this image. But right now the rectangular marquee tool is pretty straightforward. You make a selection and now only the area that's inside this rectangle can be modified. For example, if I take a brush tool over here and load it up with some color, let's change the size of my brush. So now I can paint using this brush. However, when I approach the edge of my selection, the brush color doesn't go beyond it. So it serves as a mask that protects the rest of the image. Now if I do this, the pixels that I'm painting over are gone forever, right? If I look at my preview thumbnail now in my layers panel, that red block is part of the background. If I try to move this selection, I can successfully do that. However, what it leaves behind is a blank space. Now it's not entirely blank, it's based on the background color that I have set over here. So if I change this to something different and move this block again, it should be okay because now it's kind of floating until I release it again. So if I go to select and now deselect this square of pixels, it becomes one with the image. Now what happens if I try to select it again and move it? Well, I've changed my background color over here. And to select it this time, what I'm going to use is the magic wand tool, because it allows me to select an area that's very homogeneous, for example, in color or contrast, and there's some clear edges defining it. So with the magic wand tool, I'll check the properties up here. We'll set a tolerance of 32, which is about average. It ranges between 0 and 255. The sample size is, how many variations in pixels do we want? You can take a large chunk and it'll average out that color and look for it. Anti-aliasing, that's so it creates smooth edges when we create that selection. And contiguous means that it'll only select pixels that are touching each other. So if there's another red similar to this elsewhere in the image, it won't look for it. So if I click here, it automatically creates that selection. Now, because it was deselected and these pixels became part of the background, if I try moving it this time, there you go, it leaves behind that block. The reason it's blue is because my background color is blue now, so it creates that shape when I leave it behind. The elliptical marquee tool works in a very similar way. I can create now a circle or an ellipse. Hold down the shift to get a perfect circle. Same thing with the rectangle. You can hold down shift to get a perfect square. And when you let go, then you can distort it. And so this is a perfect square. You can move your selection once you make it and move it to another part of the image and do whatever you want to do. For example, if I want to copy this pattern here, I'll make my selection. I'll press Control C, or I can go to Edit, Copy, and now I can press Control V and it pastes it. Now what's weird is we don't see what just happened. We know it worked because now I have a layer 1 in my image, so I know something got pasted in there. But what happened? Well, because we had the selection still active, when I pasted it, it pasted it automatically into that selected area. So it literally put it on top of the exact area we were copying, and it lined it up perfectly with the image, which is why it might have looked like it disappeared. So if you click the Move tool over here, you can see it's selected, and if you click and drag it, there it is. It now follows the selection. The layer is created. You can show and hide the layer by clicking the little icon over here. And now that this is a layer, it's floating above the background. We can move it and scale it, distort it, whatever, as many times as we want, and it doesn't interfere with the background image. Unfortunately for the background, these changes here are permanent. So these are the kind of selections we want to avoid, and I'll show you in the next exercise how to do that. Save your work if you want to continue playing around with this. If not, just close the file and you should be fine. Let's move on to the next exercise.